Bill Blair, first off, thanks for giving us a big chunk of your time this week to discuss this important issue for Canadians and on cannabis legalization. And tonight we're going to focus the part of our discussion here on the rules. What are your expectations for legalization? What do you think will change about our society because of the legal presence of recreational pot?
Well, you talk about the rules, which really brings us to regulation, and we're implementing the most comprehensive and what I believe will be far more effective system of regulatory control on every aspect of cannabis, from its production to its distribution and its consumption right across the country. For almost a century, we've had a single paragraph of prohibition, a criminal prohibition. And overwhelmingly, almost half of all Canadians have ignored that law. It's resulted in, a reluctance, I think, on the part of law enforcement and the criminal justice system to effect any kind of change using the criminal sanction. And so we're replacing it with a very comprehensive set of rules. And I think it's important. It's going to take some time, but it's important for Canadians to understand that regulatory system and why it's in place and how it will protect them.
And we're going to talk about a lot of that in our conversation during the course of our coverage this week. What do you expect? You talked about half of Canadians have ignored the prohibition. There's a lot of people wondering, okay, so as soon as now that we have it legalized, suddenly the numbers are going to go through the roof. Everybody's going to turn to cannabis now. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think one of the things that we've been able to do is initiate a national discussion on, lower risk guidelines and what the consequences are, particularly for young people using this drug. I've been working in that criminal prohibition for most of my adult life, and yet it's only in the last 2 years that we've heard a lot of discussion with the medical community about the impact on the developing adolescent brain, where we've now seen coming forward lower risk cannabis use guidelines that we're getting a far better understanding of the risks in impaired driving. It's been an issue since 1925 and against the law in this country, but for the first time, people are now talking about it and thinking about it. There's a lot of public information about the risks and about the consequences. We've increased law enforcement's capacity to detect it. I think those were important conversations.
You talked about how long you've been working on this and the fact you've been dealing in this area for most of your adult life as a police officer. Which part of legalization gives you the most worry?
For me, the most important part of this was reducing the incidence of use among kids. I think right now, we have the highest rates, as I mentioned, but the cannabis the kids are using, they don't know its potency, they don't know where it came from, they don't know its purity. They're associating with criminals to acquire it. And a big motive for me was to stop criminalizing our kids, but to reduce their incidence of use through restriction and through education. And so that's the thing I'll be watching most closely is how this affects our kids. And secondly, we've also.
Is that the part that gives you the most? Like, of all the rules and regulations you've put in place, what is it you're going to be watching that makes you wonder? I hope this works the way we want it to work.
Well, certainly, I want to see a reduction in use among kids, and that's the combination of both regulation and education. And the second part of that, of course, and it's also important. This is an $8 billion industry for organized crime, and we have said and have set out to displace that illicit market and replace it with a well-regulated legal one. And that'll clearly take time, and there are different models of distribution being adopted in different provinces across the country. Some of them I suspect will work better than others. We'll learn from that experience. One of the commitments I think we need to make is we're going to monitor very carefully how this rolls out, and where something is not working, move quickly to make it work. And when we discover something is very effective, make sure that everyone else has that information.
StatsCan has reported only half of the cannabis users say they will buy their weed legally after October 17th. What does that do to your plans to try and cut out the black market if half of the people say they might still be trying to get it from the black market?
I think what people say and what people do may be very different things. And I think once we offer Canadians a legal choice, a choice which is healthier and safer because they know the potency and the purity of what it is they're buying, as long as it's competitive in price and in quality and they have reasonable access to it without having, it's relatively easy to maintain or obtain, I believe most Canadians will eventually move towards the legal market. And at the same time, we've left all the criminal sanctions in place. Law enforcement can still do the job of dealing with illegal production and illegal drug trafficking because those laws and penalties still exist. What we have done in addition, though, is we've given adult consumers a choice, a legitimate choice, a healthier and safer choice.
Okay, let's talk about what's happening in the province of Quebec. There, the age was supposed to be 18. The new premier-elect in Quebec, François Legault, says he's going to bump the legal age up to 21. Prime Minister has expressed concerns that that may actually encourage the black market. What's your message for the Premier of Quebec about boosting the age to 21?
Well, first of all, we have worked well with the province of Quebec for the last 2 years in development of regulation. It's my intention to continue to work with them. I think we all share the same goals of protecting our kids and keeping this out of their hands, and at the same time displacing that illicit market. I know there is a concern because the overwhelming majority of cannabis users in this country are between the ages of 18 and 25. And when a significant cohort of that, up to the age of 21, can't legally obtain it under these new regulations, they'll continue, I suspect, to obtain cannabis from the illicit market. But I think it's something we'll work very closely with. I respect the jurisdiction of the province and the decisions that they made. I have some concerns about what impact that can have on our ability to displace the illicit market.
Right, but in your view, having worked in this area a lot, what you're telling me is that it's not a good idea. They're okay to do it. It's their right to do it.
It is their right to do it. But I will tell you, Peter, the way I looked at it is, I think we have an absolute responsibility to protect our kids, and so the regulations reflect that. But for adults, at age of adulthood, then we also want to make sure that adults who choose to make decisions about their own health can do it in an informed way and have safe and healthier choices to make. And so making sure that, a person between the ages of even 18 to 25, there is still a risk with respect to the development of their brain. There are significant health risks depending on how early they start to use it, how frequently they use, and the potency of what they use. And so we want to make sure that for adults who make this choice, they have enough information to make lower risk choices, and that what they have as to choose from is something of known potency and purity, so that they can be safer. We'll continue to work with the province of Quebec, and I believe that we share the same goals, to protect our kids and displace that illicit market. There may be some disagreement on exactly how we reach those ends, but we all intend the same thing.
A couple of quick questions to end here. You won't be looking at legalizing edibles until a year from now. A lot of people think there's benefit, health benefits in edibles versus smoking a product, and a lot of people are wondering why you're doing that. Why aren't edibles legal now too?
Two things. First of all, smoking cannabis is probably the least healthy way to consume it. We understand that, but we also understand the legal complexity and the health complexity of regulating edibles. We've learned in other jurisdictions, both Washington and Colorado, had enormous difficulty in regulating this. They urged caution, and we are exercising that caution.
And yet they're available online now. You can get them illegally.
They're available illegally online.
Why don't you shut it down?
It will be shut down. That's the responsibility of law enforcement. Our responsibility is to develop strict regulations for doing it right, and that work has already begun at Health Canada. We'll be gazetting those regulations and following through in the normal process. We have made a commitment that within 12 months of the implementation of legalized and regulated cannabis, we'll introduce the regulations for edibles.
Okay, but in the meantime, you're saying that online edible sales will be shut down.
They are operating outside of the law, and it's up to law enforcement to enforce the existing
law enforcement people are saying, look, we're busy with lots of other stuff that isn't this, and that's not our priority right now, is essentially what they're saying.
And I understand their priorities, but that was unlawful yesterday. Today, it'll be unlawful next week, even under the new regulations. The edibles are not allowed until they're regulated, and that's very clearly stated in the legislation. We're moving quickly to get those regulations in place because we know, that a lot of Canadian adult consumers are interested in a healthier way of consuming this substance, but we want to make sure that if they make that choice, it can be done safely. And there is a complexity to regulating edibles, as we're learning as we write those regs.
Bill Blair on the rules. Thank you.
Of course.